The movie begins with a group of three friends, John, Soo, Sook, and Song, playfully rating the physical appearances of girls as they watch them walking by. Their attention is suddenly captured by the presence of a plus-sized girl walking down the street. Intrigued, John Soo decides to approach her, but his intentions take an unexpected turn. Rather than making a humble request for himself, he inappropriately asks the girl if she would be willing to donate her breast milk. In response, the girl delivers a firm slap to John Soo's face, clearly expressing her displeasure. We then learn of the baby he is carrying on his back. This is a pivotal moment in the story, as the audience is left confused about the baby and how John Soo became his father. The scene then flashes to the past, taking us back to a time when John Soo's friends are being mercilessly beaten by a group of other boys. Fortunately, John Soo heroically arrives on his bike and saves the day. Following this, he heads to a Taekwondo club to meet his father, who confronts him with a question about his potential involvement in the gang. Despite denying any such affiliation, John Soo's father reacts with anger and begins to physically discipline him. Luckily, his mother intervenes, saving him from further harm. She reprimands John Soo, emphasizing that if he chooses to live in such a manner, he should consider getting married and experience the challenges of parenthood for himself. The following day, when John Soo arrives at school, he encounters a girl, Kim Bul, waiting outside, seemingly captivated by his presence. Though the girl tries to approach him, John Soo dismisses her advances and departs. Upon reaching the school, both he and his friend Song find themselves subjected to punishment by their teacher. Song insists that they're not to blame for the fight that happened the previous night. However, their teacher informs them that their fate will be determined by a committee who will decide whether they should be suspended or expelled. She also instructs them to bring their parents the next day and tells them to make sure that their mutual friend Sook attends school. Meanwhile, Kim Bul returns home and tells her mother that she wants to go to school. The latter gives it some thought and eventually agrees. The next day, Kim Bul excitedly reaches school and is admitted to the same classroom as John Soo. As the teacher introduces her and assigns a seat, she chooses to sit next to John Soo, saying that their meeting again must be destiny. During recess, John Soo and Song go to a terrace to talk. They discuss their absent friend Sook, who hasn't been answering their calls. At the same time, they attempt to light up a smoke, but before they can do so, Kim Bul arrives and chastises them, citing the health risk. Song disregards her warning, prompting Kim Bul to give him a gentle head tap before leaving. Later that night, they finally meet Sook, who reveals his decision to quit studying and rely on his job for a living. In the next scene, John Soo returns home and discovers that his parents have left, leaving a condition that they will only return if he behaves well. They have also blocked his credit card, leaving him with only $100 in his account. This is an alarming situation for John Soo, but instead of being worried, he goes to a store and invites his friends over to his house for a party. However, as he finishes the call and looks at his cart, he discovers a baby lying inside it. Alarmed, John Soo rushes to the security and reports the situation, where they find a note attached to the cart with his name on it. To his dismay, the note reveals that he is the father of the baby. Having no other option, John Soo brings the baby back to his house, where his friends are waiting, looking at his childhood pictures. One of his friends notices the resemblance between John Soo and the baby. To their surprise, Kim Bul emerges out of nowhere and asks John Soo where he obtained the baby, prompting him to explain the incident at the grocery store. The next day, John Soo attempts to find the baby's mother by meeting with girls he had previously dated. However, all of them deny being the mother. Later, we find John Soo at home with the baby, who starts crying. Overwhelmed, he panics and calls Kim Bul for help. When she arrives, she advises John Soo to check the baby's diaper. Meanwhile, John Soo's mother and father visit Asana, talking about their son and his behavior. During the night, as John Soo tries to sleep, the baby continues to cry, leading to his frustration. Unable to cope, he hastily prepares to leave the baby near a garbage bin. However, when he tries to do so, he overhears a voice from a nearby pole, reminding him that leaving trash there will incur a fine. After hearing such a warning, he refrains from doing so and instead makes his way to an orphanage. There, John Soo encounters another man holding a baby. They stare at each other for a while and then go to a shop to chat. The man confesses that he lacks the financial means to raise the child and was considering leaving it at the orphanage. However, after meeting John Soo, he has changed his mind and will work hard to provide for the baby. The following day, John Soo is at home when his teacher calls, urging him to come to school. Initially reluctant, he realizes that refusal may result in expulsion. So, he attends school and brings the baby along. Seeing John Soo with the child, the teacher questions him about the situation. John Soo admits that the baby is his, but the teacher only gets angry and scolds him. Following this, as he enters his classroom, his friends excitedly interact with the baby, except for one friend who refrains from doing so. Meanwhile, in the staff room, the teachers engage in a discussion about potentially expelling John Soo from the high school. Concerns are raised regarding the disruption of bringing a baby into the classroom, which is affecting the other students' studies. The vice principal supports this viewpoint and cites school policy as a means to take action against John-Soo. However, their conversation takes an unexpected turn as Kim Bol enters the staff room, advocating on behalf of John-Soo. She points out that there is no specific policy in place that allows them to expel John-Soo for having a child, leaving the teachers at a complete loss. Later in the evening, Soo can be seen at the hospital attentively caring for his mother when the doctor arrives and delivers some unfortunate news. He reveals that a considerable amount of money is required to proceed with his mother's treatment. When Suk reveals his financial constraints, the doctor arrogantly suggests discharging his mother and taking her home. Fortunately, John-Soo arrives and provides the necessary funds to his friend and urges the unkind doctor to initiate the treatment. It's revealed that John-Soo got the money by selling his cherished motorbike. In the next scene, John-Soo is traveling on a train making his way back home with the baby. During the journey, he sets the baby to the side and takes a nap. Later, as the train signals the approaching station, John-Soo hastily gets off. To his dismay, he realizes that he left the baby behind on the train, which is continuing on its journey. John-Soo frantically attempts to chase the train for a while, but to no avail. Suddenly, a realization dawns on him that the very thing that he's been trying to free himself of has unexpectedly left his life. He then wishes the baby a good life and heads home. However, when he reaches his room and sees the baby's belongings scattered around, he is overcome with guilt. Unable to contain his emotions, he quickly rushes to the nearby police station to report the missing baby. The officer attentively listens to his story and contacts a colleague. Soon after, the colleague arrives holding the baby in her arms. Seeing him, John-Soo finally breathes a sigh of relief. He then takes the baby with him and apologizes for leaving him inside the train. Back at home, John-Soo sits down for dinner while Kim Bol lovingly attends to the baby. As the baby rejects the formula, Kim Bol suggests that he seek out some breast milk. Hearing this, John-Soo looks towards Kim Bol, but she innocently covers her chest. The following day, he visits a nearby hospital and asks the staff about the patients who recently gave birth. At first, the staff refuses to provide him with any information, but when John-Soo starts crying, she gives him the addresses of the new mothers. After this, John-Soo visits the ladies' apartments one by one, and they provide him with breast milk for the baby. In the next scene, John-Soo and Kim Bol take the baby to a clinic for vaccination. While waiting their turn, a curious lady assumes Kim Bol to be the baby's mother and asks how many children she has. To her astonishment, Kim Bol playfully responds that she has 9 children, shocking the lady. Later in the evening, we find John-Soo taking on the role of a waiter while juggling the responsibility of caring for the baby. It is evident that the situation is challenging for him, but he has no choice but to work since his parents have blocked his credit card. During his next shift, John-Soo momentarily entrusts the baby's care to a group of girls. Unfortunately, when he returns, he discovers the baby alone on the floor, crying. Overwhelmed with guilt and concern, John-Soo quits his job, understanding the importance of being fully present for the baby. The next day in the classroom, a top student chastises John-Soo and suggests he be punished for all the disturbances he has caused the other students. However, Kim Bol stands in his defense and warns the student to steer clear of him. Shortly after, John-Soo receives a letter from the vice principal informing him that he has been suspended for a week. Defeated, he decides to drown his sorrows in alcohol. When he returns home drunk, he finds Kim Bol waiting for him outside. To his surprise, her father also arrives and expresses gratitude to John-Soo for taking care of her. He reveals that Kim Bol had dropped out of school due to feeling neglected by her teachers, but because of John-Soo's influence, she has resumed her studies. After the two leave, John-Soo enters his house and gazes at his parents' picture. This makes him so emotional that he breaks down in tears, longing for their return. The following day, John-Soo's mother does return home and is taken aback when she sees the baby. Curious, she asks Kim Bol about it, and the latter replies that the baby belongs to the homeowner. Misunderstanding the situation, John-Soo's mother assumes that the baby must be her husband and storms off to confront him. Meanwhile, John-Soo diligently goes from shop to shop in town seeking employment, but his efforts are in vain as none of the owners are willing to hire him due to the baby. Feeling frustrated, he returns home, only to find his parents waiting for him. In a state of emotional turmoil, John-Soo confesses everything about the baby and breaks down in tears. His father consoles him and suggests some rest. The next day, John-Soo and his father visit the school, leaving the baby in the care of his mother. At the school, John-Soo's father confronts the principal, expressing his outrage at his son's expulsion without a valid reason. In the midst of their conversation, John-Soo receives a call from his mother, who informs him about the baby's deteriorating health. Concerned, he and his father rush to the hospital to meet his mother and the baby. Initially, John-Soo lashes out at his mother for not taking proper care of the baby, but he soon realizes that she also loves the baby deeply, just as he does, and she is not to blame. Later, John-soo meets Suk and has a heartfelt conversation about how much he has become attached to the baby. In a shocking turn of events, Suk reveals that he is the real father of the baby and that he placed it in John-soo's cart while they were shopping. Hearing this, our protagonist gets angry. In response, Suk explains that he made this decision because he didn't want his child to have as challenging a life as his own. After he takes the baby away, John-soo is devastated and alone. The entire day, he recalls the time they spent together. Seeing him in this condition, Kim-bol suggests that he visit the baby, but John-soo adamantly refuses, expressing his frustration about the whole situation. In his frustration, he yells at Kim-bol, blaming her as well. The next morning, Kim-bol and Song meet John-soo to deliver the news that the baby has been adopted by a foreign couple and is about to leave. Initially, John-soo appears unaffected and simply walks away. Later that day at the airport, everyone gathers to bid farewell to the baby except John-soo. However, as he reflects upon his feelings, he realizes the depth of his love for the baby and makes a decision to fight for custody. So, he speeds towards the airport on his new bike. In the final scene, we see the whole group happily spending time together, with John-soo embracing the baby in his arms. At that moment, Kim-bol asks the other boys to give them some privacy and approaches John-soo. In a deliberate act, she kisses him and quickly runs away. Instead of reacting with anger, John-soo smiles, revealing that he has developed feelings for Kim.